Welcome back to a little bit of Cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast. I'm Cody Depius. That is Sam Douglas. We'd like to welcome you to this Friday, February 28th. All Co-Wetzel fans rejoice in this day, and Taco Bell, is just shivering in their boots. You'll have to be a pretty deep country music fan to understand that one. But it's a good Friday, especially after the big Bucks win yesterday, 121-112 over the Nuggets. I think my favorite line over this entire game was Brook Lopez dropping 22 points on Nikola Jokic's head. I love seeing that. And a big game for Giannis, 28 points, 19 rebounds, 7 assists. And we'll talk a little bit about Kyle Kuzma as well, 16 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. A really solid win for Milwaukee against a team that should be competing for an NBA championship at the end of the season.
Yeah, it was an awesome win last night. These Nuggets have been playing hot. They've been playing really well. They've been getting a lot of nods to be the team that's coming out of the Western Conference if it's not going to be OKC. We know their ceiling is super, super high. We know Jamal Murray has that next level, and they're long and tall. I mean, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., these guys they're tough to play against. So seeing the Bucks in kind of a tough stretch of games for them where they're home, then away, then home, then away, and they're playing every other day. It's awesome. That's a big, big win last night. Um, I got some notes from the prior two games as well as
Yeah.
last night. I don't like flying. I drove out to Vegas recently. One of the reasons I don't like flying, especially given the current culture that we have right now, these planes are crashing, Cody. I don't like
I,
that.
But actually, I think that's an entirely different conversation. But there are actually less plane crashes in the first 2 months of this year than there were all of last year. It just wasn't a conversation last year, but now it is.
That's fair.
Planes will always be crashing. They're actually crashing at a lesser rate than normal right now. But when the media looks at the planes that are crashing and you have videos of it, it's a pretty easy story to make up with everything going on in the world. So I would have flown if I were you. I respect you for driving, though. You probably saved a dime, too.
The reason if a plane's crashing, I want to be in charge of me going down. If I'm gonna fall asleep at the wheel, it's because I decided to drive 26 hours to Las Vegas. I don't want to
Yeah.
go down in a plane where I don't have control over that situation. And this is why I don't want Kyle Kuzma playing the last 2 minutes of basketball for the Bucks.
Okay.
If we're gonna go down, I don't want it to be because Kuz takes 3 bad shots in a row. He got bailed the heck out when we were playing the Rockets. Now that game didn't end up going in our favor. Kuz airballed a three, they bring it down. Giannis gets an on ball. He's playing on ball defense. They marked it as a loose ball turnover. Giannis gets a steal. They bring it down. Kuz gets his layup blocked. Come down. They hit a couple shots. That's tough. They go down. Kuz misses another shot. It was 3 possessions in a row with about a minute and a half to play, and it absolutely was a buzzkill. It was only a net 2 points because he kept getting bailed out, but it was so frustrating to me that this is why I don't like to fly planes. This is why I don't want Kyle Kuzma in the last 2 minutes. If we're going down, it needs to be Dame shooting and Giannis shooting.
Yeah, I
That
agree.
being said, that the start of the fourth quarter, we've had the same bench unit go in. It's been it's been Gary Trent, KPJ, AJ Green, Kuz, and then Chris Sims. And that's what we've done all week long for 3 games straight about the first 5 minutes. No, those guys are all athletes. It is KPJ, Gary Trent, AJ Green, Kuz, and Chris Sims. The first game, Monday, um, they absolutely rattled off some points. They went on a 15-2 run, and it pretty much won us the game. We were down, I think, 17 at one point, and then that
Mhm.
bench unit to start the fourth quarter came and absolutely dominated. Same unit Wednesday, didn't score a point in 5 minutes. Same unit last night goes on a 10-0 run against the Nuggets.
I it's it see, and that's the thing. You have multiple new players like that are just playing with these guys for the first time in their lives in the last 2 weeks in Sims and KPJ. And Gary Trent Jr. was not a Milwaukee Buck before this past year. either. But we've seen as good as they can be, and we've seen as bad as they can be. And I mean, the 5 minute stretch where you go scoreless, I'd much rather have that now than later. I think they're going to take their bumps and their bruises. They're going to learn. And I think this is a unit that could be really dangerous when it gets to the playoffs. I think there is a high ceiling for those guys. Like that, there's so much athleticism. Athleticism and at times can come without the polish. But with that amount of athleticism, your ceiling is just so high. You have so many players that can make an impact there. And Sims is out there because you don't have anybody else that can go out and grab a rebound. You saw that so horrifically against Houston. That like the rebounding numbers on that terrible. The big reason that they lost, the final score on that one was 100-97. A lot of missed opportunities there for Milwaukee. And Houston is a solid team. And you got to see that game be close. It was down to the wire, but the rebounding just really killing you down the end. And as you talked about with the Kuzma stuff, like those games happen. It's the NBA. You play 82 of them in the regular season, and you get 7-game series when it comes to the playoffs. So you take it as it is. I don't think there's anything to press a panic button on. I think you are definitely learning that Kyle Kuzma is not your closer in the last couple minutes of the game, which maybe this was an experimental thing. I don't know why you're choosing to do that in that specific situation against the team that you did it against. But, I mean, you learned your lesson that Kuzma is not going to be the guy taking those final shots. And you know that you have those guys in Giannis and Damian Lillard. And I know I probably sound like the defendant here, like the attorney for the defendant. Like I'm defending them looking like idiots out there. But I try to keep things optimistic. I think it's good now. If we start to see Kuzma still taking shots at the end of the game, that's when we start to riot.
I just think
This
that
is an experiment.
he might be a net better player than a handful of other Bucks, but in those closing minutes, I just feel like I'd rather have Torian Prince out there, who's
Yeah.
less likely to make a mistake, even though Kuz might be the better player. I think I want someone in that closing minutes who's, you know what, if he's open for three in that corner, that's a money shot for him. He has
Yeah.
a role and he's not likely to mess up. And so I really hope that even though Doc loves Kuz and Kuz is a better player, I just want to see a safe bet out there in the last couple minutes.
Yeah, I can agree with that as well. And I just hope that Rivers really has this thing figured out when it gets to the playoffs. But we have seen this team continuously improve. And as much as people might not like to hear it, Kuzma was needed for this roster at this point
Absolutely.
without Bobby Portis. Like he brings so much value. And you saw that in the game against the Nuggets where you're missing Bobby on the rebounding front. Kuzma, he's able to cover so much ground. He can go and grab that rebound. He is very valuable in that sense. He adds another scorer. Yes, it sucked to see Chris Middleton go, but I think in the end, people are going to look at this as a positive trade. As much as it sucked and it kind of broke our hearts, at this point in time with Bobby Portis missing the next 25 games, Kuzma is so valuable for this stretch. So I have to give it to Horst there. It was hard to in the moment, but even just a couple weeks in the situation that Milwaukee's in, because they were on thin ice there with Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis being the 2 and 3 in that front court. Kuzma just helps so much.
Yeah, Horst might have cooked. He might have cooked. KPJ's looking like an athlete. Kuz looks like an athlete who is just in no man's land in Washington, and finally he's just hooping for 4 years,
Yeah.
and finally he has something to hoop for. And I think you can tell the excitement with which he plays. There's an energy that we haven't seen from Kuz and we hadn't seen from the Bucks that we didn't know was there or not. But like I said when he first came over, these guys are NBA players, man. They've
Yeah.
got something in them. There's a drive, there's an athleticism. It takes something to get into this league, and hopefully Kuz is tapping into it for just half a season. Maybe that's all that he's got. We just lock in for the last 30 games and into the playoffs. But like you said, the value that he's brought this team is second to none.
I think a ring is worth 10 years. How I think of this stuff. Like you get 10 years out of your career, I think you can smile and look back on if you have one ring when you look down at your hand. And I mean,
Sure.
it sucks to look at for a player like a Giannis Antetokounmpo And it stinks the fact that Kuzma already got his ring, but we can call that a bubble Disney ring. That's a fake ring. That one doesn't count. That one's worth maybe 2 years. So I think Kuz really searching for that 10-year worth ring for the Milwaukee Bucks. I see we've talked about it all year. The ceiling for this squad is incredible. Just consistency is going to be the bottom line when it gets down to it. They'll take on the Mavs tomorrow. Any storylines you like for that game?
Anthony Davis is still out. Their whole front court is out. So this should be actually the first time in a while where the Bucks have a presence on defense. Hopefully Chris Sims gets involved a little bit. Hopefully Sims gets involved. Offensively gets a little feel for things. Gafford is down still. I believe AD is down. Lively is down. I think their starting four centers are all not playing. It's always electric to watch Kyrie Irving, one of my favorite players ever. So I'll be tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. And one that you would just hope that the boys down low can really eat it up and just get that roll going, especially missing Bobby Portis. Not just the biggest basketball game this weekend, maybe one of the biggest in the entire nation.
Yeah.
Number 11, Wisconsin at number 8, Michigan State Sunday at noon 30. Michigan State has been hot. Wisconsin needs these wins. They're 2 games back of Michigan State with 2 games to play in the Big Ten. So they're going to need some outside help, but they're going to have to take down the number 8 team in the country to do so. And Wisconsin, they got their big bounce back win against Washington on Tuesday, 24 points from Blackwell. They kind of blew them out. How do you see Wisconsin's chances going into Sunday?
Well, Michigan State is not a world class top 10 team. They've had 3 losses in February, but they're hot right now. And we've seen the Badgers get a little streaky. So if we're not carrying over any poor shooting or bad habits from our recent loss, then we should absolutely be able to play these guys. But their last 3 games, Michigan has beat 3 ranked opponents. They beat Purdue 75-66. Then they go on to beat Michigan, who is ranked 12th. They blew them out by 13. Then they beat Maryland, who was ranked 16. So this Michigan State team has seen good teams and they've beat them, and they've beat them recently. So this is a big test for the Badgers, and door's going to be open. I think if we can get a lead early, feel confident about our shooting, and score 80 plus, which we know we can absolutely beat these guys.
I think we can too. And this Michigan State team, there's not really the big superstar that you need to handle on the defensive side. It's an entire roster. It's a very well-balanced lineup there, led by 2 guards, Jaden Akins and Jace Richardson. Richardson, really nice shooter. Akins, more of an inside scorer. It's a team without superstars, but there are so many good players that can impact the game. The lines are so similar where their bench gets deep as well. You're going to have to look to your top 2 for Wisconsin. It's going to be Blackwell and it's going to be Tanjay. Those guys are going to have some stellar days to take down this team, and they're coached very well too. Of course, you know what Izzo does. This team didn't have a lot of expectations, if any expectations, going into this year. They've exceeded them all, similarly to Wisconsin, actually. I'd say these 2 teams are at a pretty similar level, where Wisconsin, they suffered a couple of, you can call them bad losses, in the Big Ten, like the one to UCLA, not great. You had the one to Maryland as well. But Wisconsin, an opportunity here if they can beat Michigan State. Michigan is right there as well. They're going to need to lose that game yesterday. Kind of stunk where Michigan won on a buzzer beater to go a full game up instead of just a half game up on Wisconsin. So, as I said, they're going to need help to get that regular season Big Ten title. It's not impossible, but it all starts against Michigan State on Sunday. And I will also mention this. I think this game is really the difference between a 2 seed and a 3 seed. If Wisconsin gets that 3 seed, they don't get home court advantage in that first game in March Madness, because that bracket would be actually set in Milwaukee. So it would be home court. This is a very, very important game where you look at it and you say, okay, not that big of a deal if Wisconsin loses. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not. It's the difference of 1 seed. But if Wisconsin can get a 2 seed and they start the tournament out in Milwaukee, that could be huge. So a lot more on the line in this game than just Big Ten title hopes and taking down a conference foe and one of the top 10 teams in the nation. This is one that most people in the state of Wisconsin Wisconsin should have on the second they get home from church on Sunday. It's going to be a barn burner. It's going to be a good one. I got some hopes for it. I think they can do it. I mean, it's hard to beat ranked teams 4 times in a row. And Michigan State, they got their streak of 3. I expect that to maybe be put to jeopardy on Sunday. We have some Packers news coming out this week. We'll start it at the top as I was kind of frustrated. It was right after we posted the podcast on Monday that the news came out that it was announced that the team that was asking for the tush push to be banned was the Green Bay Packers. And all the fingers are essentially pointing to Mark Murphy. He's stated things before. It's a talentless play, is what he says. All you need is a quarterback sneak, and that boded well for Bart Starr and the Packers back in the NFC Championship game and in the Ice Bowl. And I mean, he has his point. I kind of think it's a soft thing to ask to be banned because Philly's so good at it because of the players that they have. Like, not every quarterback can go and do a tush push like that. Jordan Love isn't even the guy to go in for quarterback sneaks. It's Tucker Kraft. And that's the difference in players and the skills of your players. And I think it's just an advantage for Philly, and I think it's something that teams have to deal with. Sam, I want your thoughts on Green Bay being the reported team to ask to ban the tush push.
If it was easy, the Buffalo Bills would have been in the Super Bowl because they tried to
Yeah.
sneak it about 142 times against Kansas City. That being said, I think Murph's just keeping it a buck, man. I think he's being real. I think this is something that no GM or anybody or owner wants to say because they're, oh, you take a little bit out of football, and it's such a classic, like purist sport. Oh, hit him in the mouth. It feels very football. I think Murph's just saying what a lot of people are thinking. What is it, man? It doesn't resemble anything else in the game. It is a little bit talentless. You can see the opportunity for head and neck injuries there. I mean,
Yeah.
it was one playing. Chris Jones is already, rattling the sideline. He's not like an old man. He's getting there. Um, you'd have to put like a stipulation on it. I mean, is it two guys touching one runner and pushing forward? Because where do you draw the line on that? So I think Murph's just keeping it real and being the adult in the room, and somebody has to say it to start that conversation. Do I expect a change? Not until a good 4, 5, 6 teams are doing it regularly. As long as it's just Philadelphia, I'd be shocked if the NFL went and made a change. But once you start seeing a handful of teams do it with the success that Philly's doing it with, then I think we're due for a change. Because this, it's a football, it's a sports. When the sport makes changes, it's for the better. Baseball put that pitch clock on, and oh, it doesn't feel like baseball anymore. But you know what? It was for the better. It was a good idea.
Mhm.
You got to change. You got to evolve. If something isn't working, if there's a kink in the hose, figure it out. And Philadelphia has had unbelievable success. If it feels like they're playing every set of downs, to 9 yards to 8 yards, and there's an unfair advantage, then we figure it out and we can tweak a rule. So if we get to a point where we need it, I'm glad that someone is saying it, that it is being brought to the table because I don't think we can run from change. but but I'm happy the conversation started, and I don't expect anything to change soon though.
Here, I have a change. This is my proposal. This is what I bring to the NFL. Okay. Every single NFL roster, I think you have I think it's a 53-man roster now, as you have your emergency quarterback. I think
Sure.
now, like the emergency quarterback, you add another roster spot where there is one guy that can sit on the bench that you bring out only for tush push defensive situations. And then every NFL general manager goes over to Tokyo and they watch the sumo national championships over there. They sign a guy, they bring him in, and that is your stop of the tush push. I saw one picture, and most Packer fans probably know this picture of Gilbert Brown where he has the visor, like all 380 pounds of Gilbert Brown. And the
Mhm.
caption was, "This is how you stop the tush push." Yeah, go find that monster of a human being. Like if that's you have to go and ask for the NFL to change because people are struggling at stopping a play. You have to do something to counter that yourself too, other than just asking for people to change it for you. And I
Yeah.
mean, Green Bay has actually had a little bit of success against the tush push. They've stopped it 3 times in the last 2 games that they've played Philadelphia, at least the numbers that I saw on Twitter. They're one of the most successful teams at stopping it, which just makes me curious as to why Green Bay is that one team that wants to make the change. And I think it's soft. I think it sets a precedence where Green Bay has not had this dogfight mentality. And it feels like this the franchise has been this way the last few years where it's been a little bit soft. Like when you think of guys that are we'll say maulers on this team, like who's the ooh rah rah, let's go tear their head off kind of guy on this Packers team. It's hard to think of any. Like Jair was a guy who would pump guys up, but you've kind of seen the other things that have come to light. Like he didn't want to play at times, which was a concern to people. That's not an ooh rah rah play through injury, go rip a guy's head off mentality. I think this, and I'm not saying that it influences the team all that much. It's just how I think people view the Packers, kind of. Like, even when you look back the past couple of years where they say that the officials have helped the Packers, which I know that that narrative is now switched to the Kansas City Chiefs, but just this, it's the idea of now Green Bay is that one team that is singled out that is complaining about this thing, which there are probably quite a few general managers that are complaining about it, but I just don't like Green Bay being the first one to come to light where it's like, yeah, Mark Murphy kind of wimpy, kind of being a wimp out there. So it's not that big of news, not that big of a deal. I don't think anything's going to change. Some other news that wasn't quite news to us. We all expected this, but the Green Bay Packers are now officially open to trading Jair Alexander. And I'm going to add to this conversation the reports that have come to light this morning that Green Bay has put an offer on the table to trade for DK Metcalf. The report is that Green Bay wants to trade one of their high draft picks and one of their young receivers in exchange for DK Metcalf, and that what they would try to get back with Jair Alexander would try to get back a little bit of the draft capital that they lose in bringing in DK Metcalf. So I know this is news to Sam, as he might have had a late night and a late morning, afternoon. So this is all news to him. I want your instant reactions. What do you think about that trade proposal? I heard that the high draft pick might even be the 23rd overall pick. What would you think? I'll put it on the table. The 23rd overall pick and Romeo Doubs for DK Metcalf and a late round pick right now. What would you
I
think?
don't like it. I don't like it. And I'm standing firm on I'm not on team bring in a stud wide receiver. I want us to invest in our young guys. I think we have too much talent to just sell it and bring somebody new in. I want us to start targeting Reed and Kraft and get Jacobs his touches and use Dobbs and use Wicks a little bit. I think there's so many other things that we can focus on other than the receiver room. It just doesn't feel necessary. Now, if Jordan Love is passionate about this, if Josh Jacobs is passionate about it, if the locker room is dead set on this, those are the guys, that's the chemistry that's important. And if Jordan Love is going to have that number one receiver where he takes, his 2, 3 step drop and just fires it to his guy, that's all we're looking for. I just think we can do that in the locker room that we have already. So if we're spending that first round pick, for gosh sakes, get a corner, get somebody on the D line. If we're making a send, we have so many receivers that we can invest in. I'm going to stand on this rock. It sounds like we're really fishing in the receiver market. So I'll come around when we make the move. But
Yeah.
for the time being, I just don't think that there's other moves that we can be making.
I disagree with you a little bit. I agree in the sense that there are other moves and other holes I think that are more glaring, but I do
Mhm.
think a different receiver is needed in this room. I think a leader is needed in this room. I think the lack of development that you saw with the wide receivers last year was due to the lack of leadership. Who do those guys look up to? The guys that they were drafted with in their same class that they probably think in their own head that they're better than. So I'm going to do things my way because that's the right way to do it. And I don't want to call anybody's character out, but that there have been things that have been said by these wide receivers. You understand that Dobbs sat out of practice. Jaden Reed doesn't like when fans talk bad about the players, even though their wide receiver core may have led the NFL in drop passes last year. Dontavion Wicks can post a bunch of laughing emojis and a thumbs down when your star running back and the star of your team says that Green Bay would probably benefit from a number one wide receiver. Like that's those actions are kind of showing to me I think I deserve more. And I think that's kind of and I haven't heard anything from Christian Watson. I've heard actually only awesome things about his character. Yeah, he's had the dropsies in the past too. I just think that there is a leader that is missing in the room. Like for instance, if a Devonte Adams walked in, those guys are doing what Devonte Adams is doing because Devonte Adams is going to be a Hall of Famer. They understand what he's done. He's already garnered all that respect in Green Bay. I don't know if DK Metcalf would be that leader, especially not to the extent that a Devonte Adams would be, but I think even a veteran, like even somebody that might not be a top tier wide receiver right now, that can show these guys what it takes going throughout practice. What do your walkthroughs look like? What does your routine look like? What are you eating? What is your sleep schedule? Like just the little things that go into perfecting your craft that I don't think these guys have been putting enough emphasis on in the past couple years. And I'm saying this without ever meeting any of these guys. I don't know who they are. This is all just speculation. This is all just report, but they're all young. They're all around the same age. And I don't think there's the one guy that everybody in that room looks up to and respects. And I think most groups and most teams need that when you look around. And you can look in all the position groups with Green Bay, and there's usually the one guy that's been there for a little bit longer than everybody else. And he is that leader. And I think the receiver room is really that one group that has been missing that. We can transition here to the cheese grater, everybody's favorite segment of the show. I got a couple of questions for Sam. I'll kick it off here at the top. Is there any possible way that Giannis can get back in the MVP conversation, especially seeing him maybe not outperforming Nikola Jokic, but leading his team to a victory over Nikola Jokic?
We can say outperform. We can absolutely say outperform. Giannis
Okay.
outperformed Jokic last night. And one note that I had down that I didn't say earlier is Giannis can do everything Jokic can do. Jokic can't do everything Giannis can do.
Correct.
He's yeah, absolutely, the defense and athleticism is different. Maybe Jokic can hit a three that Giannis can't, but he doesn't take them. I bet they finish with similar total threes made, throughout the season because Jokic's only taken one or two a game. Um, it would need to be a losing streak from Oklahoma City. It would need to be a losing streak from Denver, and the Bucks would probably need to finish, a considerable top three team, and like a losing streak from the Knicks. I think if we're
Yeah.
jumbled up in that 4, 5, 6 range in the East, which is so tight right now, I just don't see it going his way. Especially with Oklahoma City, they started the year the best team. They're gonna finish the year the best team. SGA has never slowed down once. He's been Mr. Consistency all year long. He's got the defensive numbers to back it up as well. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10. 10 being he can absolutely be the MVP. He's talented enough. I'd vote for him. I've been on the Giannis train all season long. He's kept this team afloat all year. So I'd vote for him, but I don't see it actually going his way. Who's going to lead the Brewers in home runs this year?
Jackson Churio. I think that swing in spring training. He's hitting like 440 right now in spring training. Like they just can't get him out. That swing looks so good. And what we saw at the end of last year, that I was smelling a little bit of what we smelt back in 2018 and 2019 with Christian Yelich. To the point where when he walks up to the plate in a clutch moment,
Mhm.
the people in the outfield are getting ready to catch a ball. The people that are sitting out there in the stands. I remember watching that playoff game with you this year saying, hey, first inning home run. I feel like Churio's just got it in him. And I
Mhm.
think it was the third pitch he saw. He sent it over the right field wall. The kid, I'm expecting over 30. I think Contreras has that kind of power in his bat. I just don't think that's what his goal is when he steps up to the plate. I think he's a gap doubles kind of guy. And from your catcher, I'm going to live with that every day of the week and twice on Sundays. I think he's the best overall catcher in all of baseball. Yelich, we've seen him do it before. I don't need him to do that. I want him to hit over 300 and get on base at around a 400 clip. I don't need the power numbers. If he can pop about 15 out this year, that's awesome. That's not his job. Churio, I think, is going to be that big bat in the lineup that is going to surprise a lot of people. I bet he's in the MVP conversation at the end of the year. Green Bay has to trade for DK Metcalf. What is your ideal trade package? What is the most that you would give up?
2 3s.
Okay.
I don't know. A 3 in Wicks. I think it's so unnecessary. I really do. It's going to frustrate me when it happens. I want to see these guys get a shot. They're growing. They're 22, 23 years old, for crying out loud. Like, let this process. What's the point of having a young team if you're just going to sell out and not see their full development, man? Take a 7th in Bull Melton. What bullpen arm is going to have the lowest ERA for the Brewers this year?
This is an interesting question because you never know what the end of the year bullpen is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually not your closer. I will say that as your closer is looked at as the best reliever in that bullpen, it's usually not the closer. They'll come in a 3-run save and they'll give up 2 runs and they still got the save. They still got their job done. Those runs, they bite the ERA a little bit. So it's usually not the closer. So I'm going to lean and say not Trevor McGill. Trying to think of that back end. I don't think it'll be all Piamps. I think that Brian Hudson has an opportunity to. I think his health status is good. I think he's good and he should be ready. I put him in contention for that. And call me crazy, he looked a little bit wild his first spring training start, but I believe that Jacob Mizorowski is going to end up on this bullpen, and I'm going to pick him just because I think he has the highest ceiling stuff. He has to stay in the strike zone. He has a big walk problem. He walked 3 guys in his first spring training inning, and that's been the bugaboo, is what I hear from him throughout his minor league career. I don't think he's a starting pitcher. I think he's a reliever, and I think he's going to be a darn good one. I think he could light the world on fire this year. Who is the X factor, or what is the X factor for Wisconsin at Michigan State on Sunday?
Got to be the defense, man. This is a hot team. You got to play some stifling defense. I think that comes as a full unit. They got to be connected. They got to be moving their feet. They got to rattle this Michigan State team. Izzo's going to have these guys prepared. So I think if we can hold them to under 35 in the first half, I think that's a win for this Badgers team, and I think that's the recipe for success. We'll hit our free throws. We'll get our points. We got to rattle these guys and really step on them right away. Little trivia for the last one. Packers all-time touchdown leader.
Packers all-time touchdown leader. I know at one point, and I actually think it's still true, I think it is Don Hudson.
With 105, it's Don Hudson. Can you get 2 and 3?
I know that Sterling Sharp was, I think he's either 2 or 3.
Nope.
No, he's not.
Sterling Sharp
Devontae
is number
Adams.
6. Devontae Adams is number 3 with 73 touchdowns.
And number 2, it's probably a running back.
Yep.
Jim Taylor?
Bingo. There it is. The Jim Taylor second all-time Packer touchdowns with 91. Hudson, Taylor, Adams.
Yeah, I mean, Don Hudson, if you haven't taken a look at that Pro Football Reference page, what he was doing at the time that he was doing it, I know he was like top 5 in NFL's top 100 players of all time, which was probably done 15 years ago. But it's never talked near enough, even amongst Packer circles, what Don Hudson was able to do in the receiving game when nobody threw the football ever. 105 touchdowns for a wide receiver. What era did he play in? Was it the 30s?
1935 to 1945. Yeah, World War II.
Pre-World War II. Into World War II, he had 105 touchdowns. That's 10 receiving touchdowns over the course of 10 years. That is inconceivable, incomprehensible. what Don Hudson did. He's a top 10 NFL player of all time. All eras considered. No, he's the guy. He'll always be the guy. That's why it's the Don Hudson Practice Center in Green Bay. I have a What's Gouda. Do you have a What's Gouda, Sam? I don't know if you
I,
prepared
I
one.
don't have any what's good. I want to hear your Gouda.
My Gouda, I brought it up before, but I'm going to say it again because I think a lot of memes came out of it. Brooke Lopez dropping 22 points on Nikola Jokic. They called him fat and they called him slow. And I just love all the Nikola Jokic slander. I think is hilarious. When Jokic statistically and what he's doing on offense, this might be one of the greatest offensive seasons that we've ever seen. He's probably going to average a triple double. He had one yesterday and his team lost. Like his stat line on offense was incredible. But the difference here, and where you would always pick a Giannis over him, zero defensive prowess at all for Nikola Jokic. Sam and I would like to thank you for being here with us on this Friday. We'll be back on Monday, hopefully with a Badger win. This has been another edition of A Little Bit of Cheese, your bite-sized Wisconsin sports podcast.